Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morin. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound, Vic Morin and Neil Smith. And it took until the final 81 seconds on the final game on the NHL schedule to determine the field. And now we are all set. We're going to unpack it all with this special Stanley Cup preview. And we're going to be joined by longtime studio host and play-by-play man for the NHL on ESPN, John Buccigross. But first, a word from our friends at MyGray.
From Howe to Hughes, from Bellevue to Bedard, we're your source for game worn jerseys. Go to mygray.com, MEIGRAY.com to start your collection today. Get real. Get it from MyGray.
Welcome back to NHL Wraparound, and now it is my pleasure to introduce a former colleague and friend, John Buccigross of ESPN. And John, I just want to let you know before we get started, this is a serious hockey show. We have a little bit of fun in the middle of it, but the one key thing here, look at the two co-hosts here. No makeup required.
Pretty impressive. I'm also going on natural. I'm a little self-conscious, so I'll do my best to marshal on with no makeup.
All right, so we're going to get into this. We're going to go all 8 series, a lot to unpack here. And I think the first thing that we're going to start with is the President's Trophy winning New York Rangers going to open up against the Washington Capitals. Teams were 2-2 during the regular season, so Caps were able to play the Rangers pretty tight all year. This is the 10th time they're going to meet in the postseason. 5 times in 7 years they met in the middle of the last decade. The last was in 2015 with the Derek Stepan overtime goal in Game 7 in round number 2. Neil, I'm going to start with you here. There's probably no player that's going to be under more of a microscope than Artemi Panarin. Remarkable season, career year, but realistically, he played with an unbelievable amount of purpose after the disappointment of last year's playoffs. So how do you see him responding as the guy that is really going to have the target on his back?
Yeah, I would be surprised and happy for him if he was able to respond in the playoffs. He doesn't ever appear to me to be a playoff type player. He's an East-West player who doesn't like dump and chase, doesn't like grinding it out. He likes all skill all the time. Having said that, he's a tremendous talent. He did tremendous things this season. Gerard Gallant is no longer the coach. Peter Laviolette is there. He didn't like playing for Gallant. He likes playing for Laviolette. I think that's why the season's turned around for him. But there's definitely going to be 18,000 eyeballs, actually 36,000 eyeballs, directly on him every time he comes on the ice, because that crowd at Madison Square Garden is waiting for him to do something in the playoffs. And this might, if he doesn't do anything this year, that Garden crowd will be pretty ugly.
John, I wanted to follow up with that because I think, stylistically, the Rangers like to go lateral. They like to go diagonal. That's a lot of Panarin's game. And Spencer Carberry and the Caps like to jam up that neutral zone, and they like to have their opposition force you to dump the puck in. So how do you see Panarin and his Ranger cohorts faring?
Yeah, I really am impressed with Carberry. Met him this year doing a game in Pittsburgh right after the new year. I think it was January 2nd, actually, a Capital Penguin game, and just really impressed by his intellect, his energy. He just bounces right off himself right onto you. I can see why playing for him is probably really enjoyable for players. He respects the older guys, energizes the younger guys, gives them confidence. I think he's going to have a job for 20 years. He's going to be like Peter DeBoer. Peter DeBoer hasn't missed a paycheck He's gone from job to job to even being fired mid-season and got another job during the season. And there's a reason why guys like that get jobs. I think Carberry is going to be right in that cloth. He's like a Hall of Fame destined coach in my mind. So he's tactician, he's smart and composed, and yeah, he's going to try to muck it up. With the Rangers, I think +1 5-on-5 this year. They're not a great 5-on-5 team. They're going to rely on the power play. So Tom Wilson's got to be disciplined. They can't be in the box. I'm sure that'll be one of his points of emphasis is let's don't take penalties. 1 a game, maybe 2 a game. That's our chance. They have some experience up the middle. They have some gamers, and you look at their lineup. It's like they got some guys. I know their goal differential is terrible, but they got a puncher's chance for sure. The goalie's hot, although the gloves on the other hand, Tony Esposito, Darren Pupa style. But that always makes me gives you the willy-nillys when that glove's on the other hand. So, the Rangers are the favorite. They should win. But like Neil said, let's see them 5-on-5 and see stylistically, are they prepared to play Carolina or Florida or someone like that as they go deeper?
We were talking about the metrics and the goal differential for the Capitals, and they're kind of like the 1960 Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series against the Yankees. They got outscored 55-27, still won the series. They played it, but here's the interesting thing about them is that this team is really comfortable playing in close games. They had 33 one-goal games this season, but only 2 losses in regulation, but their losses 24 by 3 or more goals, which puts them right there with the likes of the San Jose Sharks and Chicago Blackhawks.
Wow. Yeah, Obi wasn't scoring at all the first half of the season. They're a different team when he gets going, which he clearly did. I didn't realize he had that in him that second half of the year. So that they're a little bit of a different team with him. And they're starting to get some stuff. They're starting to get the roles defined. New coach, Strome and McMichael, and they got some stuff. John Carlson, I think he's like borderline Hall of Famer. He's got a chance if he finishes strong these next 5 years. Great numbers, interesting career, going back to World Junior Gold with his overtime goal in Canada on the road. That's got to give him some points. So there's guys there. There's champions there. So it's a reason why they're able to put down the gas at the end and squeak in. But again, I expect the Rangers to win this thing.
I think one of the good sidebar stories, Neil, that we're going to see here, and we've mentioned him probably more than we should have, is the role that Matt Rempe would have, especially with a guy like Tom Wilson on the other side. Do you see Rempe playing a big role in this series, or is this just a sideshow?
I hope for the Washington Capitals they play him, because that would be the greatest mistake they could make, putting a guy in that can't play in the league. He's no offset to Wilson. Wilson's a real good player. It just unfortunately that he doesn't have enough discipline, as John talked about. At times, he shows a real lack of discipline. Really shocking, because I really admire him as a hockey player and the way he can play and the style that he's given the Capitals that keeps the other team on edge. But then he goes and does that one-handed stupid thing with Toronto. And it's like, dude, like, you're a good player. Don't do this stuff. They need you on the ice. They need you playing. Rempe, I don't see any use for Rempe at all in the playoffs. I didn't see any use for him in the regular season. So I certainly don't see use for him in the playoffs.
John, is this the only type of series that Rempe could actually play in? Like, I don't necessarily think that if the Rangers advance beyond this and maybe they play a team like Carolina, who are playing against the New York Islanders, more of a wide open, less physical team, are the Capitals the only type of team that he could really play?
I guess so. Even that's a stretch. Tom Wilson's not going to waste his time fighting Rempe. He is the most penalized guy in the league, and he has to realize for this matchup, I can't take that dumb penalty. Like Neil said, not against this power play. Our only chance is to limit the power plays, and see how it plays out. I can't, unless, something happens in the series, like, as we know, with some sort of dirty hit or something. Maybe you plug him in if you need some life and you're going to go to a short bench anyway. But yeah, it's a stretch at this point to try to figure out what the theater is going to be to allow him to play. But yeah, if the team's flat and the crowd's flat and the crowd's booing, like Neil said, maybe someone like him, their big mascot, can come in and bring some positive vibe. Maybe that'd be the only way that they would see value in that.
Well, I'll just look at the goaltending quickly. Igor Shesterkin for the Rangers has really found his game, particularly over the second half of the season. But, John, a pretty good surprise in the Washington net where Darcy Kemper was supposed to be the guy that carried the mail, won the Stanley Cup for Colorado a couple of years ago. But Charlie Lindgren looks like he's going to be the top banana in goal.
Yeah, like I said, gloves on the wrong hand. Gives me the willy-nillys, but he's playing with a lot of confidence right now, a lot of swag. You can see it. I watched all their games down the stretch, and he's playing with confidence. So a hot goalie this time of year can do some things. But again, I still think the Rangers and their sharpshooting and the shots they're going to get on him, I think they'll be able to finish. And there's a reason why those teams are struggling to get in the playoffs on the bubble. And because they don't get those quality of shots at them like they will from the Rangers.
I think the matchup that's really interesting too is going to be the brothers against each other. The Tony Esposito, Phil Esposito matchup. John, I know you'd like that to go back in time and talk about another goaltender brother matchup. But Ryan Lindgren, Charlie Lindgren plays goal the way Ryan Lindgren plays defense. He will do whatever it takes, sacrifice whatever it takes to stop that puck from going in the net, much the same way as Ryan Lindgren will do whatever it takes to stop offensive players from coming into the defensive zone and getting scoring chances. I mean, these kids, I don't know how they were raised, but obviously they got great parents and great mentoring because they're both warriors. And I think it's really neat to see them go against each other in this series.
Neil, number of games in this series, then you, John.
I think 5.
I think 5's the safe number. Yep.
I think we're unanimous. So Rangers in 5, and we're going to keep the tally sheet to bring out in round 2, see how we all do. Let's move over to the Carolina Islanders series. And interesting that the club split the season series. Road team won every game. This will be their third postseason meeting, and the Carolina Hurricanes have won both of those, including 6 games last year in their playoff series. I think special teams, John, are going to be really key here because Carolina's second in power play, first in penalty killing. And when you have the second ranked power play and you're going up against the penalty killing unit that was dead last, that's a bad cocktail for the Islanders.
Yeah, to me, even without knowing those numbers, just remembering just from your eye test, you can tell this is a big mismatch in terms of a power play. I can't imagine the Islanders scoring power play goals against Carolina. Meanwhile, Jake Gensel coming aboard has given them so much dynamic play, especially on the power play. That team needed another guy like him. When Kuznetsov came aboard, he was really good early, really their most talented player. And it's funny, when you get 2 guys like that who come on the team, it kind of properly slots Sebastian Aho. I think his underratedness was overrated at times. He's a grinding player. He's not a big talent. He just knows how to play. And those guys are important come playoff time. He's a winner. I love him. But in terms of, just pure talent in some of those situations where you're going up and down and the high skilled guys going to make the big difference, and Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid at the extreme end, but even Panarin, Pasternak, like he's not at that level. He needed some help this time of year. They had a problem scoring goals in the past. They've addressed that a little bit with Gensel. It makes their power play better. And Seth Jarvis who's really going to be a gem of that first round. When you get a guy in the, as Neil knows, mid-late first round, who's that kind of player, man, that's a big difference organizationally in the next 5, 6, 7 years. When you hit on those guys, like remember the Ducks did it with Perry and Getzlaf in the 20s. They win a cup. You got to get that third rounder point. Second rounder, Bergeron, the late first rounder who pops, and the guys who picked third overall made the big mistake, right? So they're ready to go. My concern about Carolina, and this is more probably deeper, is if they play stylistically the same way all the time, when they get into series, they can be figured out. The lock can be picked, and then they fizzle late like they did last year.
There's also a healthy Svechnikov that is going to be in their lineup this year, and he was out last year. And I think, you add him back into the lineup, and like you said, Gensel, this is a pretty formidable unit. But, to your point, and Neil, I want you to follow up on this here, is that I think the Islanders are going to try to get the Hurricanes into a bit of a slog, play the series more along the boards if they're going to have any chance to win here.
Oh, absolutely. And, I see every Islander game, home game anyway. And this is a team that really, really has difficulty scoring. I mean, they have such a tough time. And then they have a very weak penalty killing unit, as you mentioned. And then they have Patrick Roy has done something to Varlamov to make him come back to looking like he's playing in Colorado many years ago. He's played really well. Sorokin is an incredible talent in that. So they got two really good goaltenders there. I think Patrick Roy will go with Varlamov just because he seems to be the flavor of the month for him. They've got he's changed the lines around, but they don't have those offensive or defensive talents that Carolina has. Carolina has such a good defense. Carolina has, I think, Freddie Anderson, this is his year. If he's ever going to show that he is a, big time top goaltender, he's got to do it now because he hasn't been able to do it in the past. He certainly did it this regular season. I just think Carolina's way too powerful for the Islanders in so many different areas. I'm not sure there's a game that the Islanders can pull Carolina into to take advantage of them because they seem to me to be stronger in every area. I think the Islanders had a great ending to their season. Boy, did they ever make everybody happy at UBS Arena by turning it on at the right time. I didn't think they were going to make it, but then they turned it on and certainly proved me wrong. But you know what? I can't imagine that there's a lot more fairy dust in that wand that Patrick Roy seems to have.
Well, I mean, it was an 8-0-1 streak to finish the season. But John, some of the wins were a little bit on the unimpressive side. 1-goal wins against some really weak opponents. I mean, maybe, two of the stronger games they played were against the Rangers. But how do you see this team? They've got some good veteran presence. They've got some experience. They have a little bit of youth, but they're not really fast. I mean, there's not a real identity to this club.
Yeah, like you said, you play a good team every night this time of year, so you can get exposed quickly. But I am impressed with Patrick Roy. One of the great parts of our job at ESPN is after he talks to the media, he comes and the coaches come talk with us one-on-one. They tend to be very candid, very giving. It's just an absolute gold conversation we tend to have with all these coaches who are really good. And something about Patrick Roy is really interesting. I think he's one of those coaches, when the players sit on the bench, they can feel him behind them without seeing him. And that's a great trait for a coach. Not all of them have it. Some of them are empty suits. And he likes analytics. He's into analytics, which that surprised me. We know he's so competitive. I wrote a book with Keith Jones, and he said Patrick would walk in the room and say, we're changing the PK tonight. Just like in the playoffs, we're doing this. And he would take over the whiteboard and say, this is how we're doing the PK tonight. Like, he was a captain mentality and of course, that was the great thing about Joe Sakic's leadership. He allowed those guys to speak, Bork and obviously Waugh and Peter Forsberg or whomever. So really impressed with Patrick Roy. And there's anybody whose will could inspire and steal a series, it's him. But I think the disparity is too big here.
How deep can they take this series?
For me, I will say 5 games. And I'm not doing that just to be easy because I said it on the last one. I don't see the Islanders winning more than one game if they can win one game.
John, thoughts?
Yeah, if they win game one, which we know that can happen, right? Anybody can always win a game one somehow, fluky, hot goalie, couple power play goals, and then they might be able to squeeze out another one and make it 6. But yeah, I do. I as well like the Hurricanes at 5.
And once again, we're in agreement, and that'll be the series that kicks off the entire playoffs on Saturday at 5:00 Eastern. So let's head over to the Atlantic Division, and Florida playing Tampa Bay, and kind of wonder whether the Panthers really wanted this matchup. This is the 3rd time that they're going to meet, and Tampa Bay has won both of the previous series, 6 games in 21, a sweep in 22. But this year, the road team won all 3 games. And I still think Tampa Bay has a little bit of a memory of that 9-2 whacking that the Panthers gave them on the 17th of February. So this is a series that's got a lot of intrigue just because they are in-state rivals. They've both had success. And Neil, how do you see this one unfolding?
It's going to be a gang mentality versus a skill mentality. I mean, the players on Tampa Bay, I love watching Kucherov play. I love Vasilevsky in net. I love Stevie Stamkos still, the way he can one-time those power play shots. Braden Point, and Braden Point and Kucherov together are magical. Nick Paul, I like. I can go on and on, but their depth has been cut down so significantly from winning those 2 Stanley Cups, and therefore players needing to go and get what they deserve based upon their success with Tampa. So they don't have Goodrow anymore. They don't have, you can name a lot of different players, but they still have those high skilled players. They still have Hedman, one of the best in the league in my mind. I think that the Florida Panthers are just going to try to pound them into submission. And I think they will. I think at some point that the Tampa Bay will have to submit, because I don't think they can play with them that way now. And I think that with Barkov and et al., I should say Barkov and the rest, who Barkov's playing the best I've ever seen him play the last couple of years, that they got enough skill to play against Tampa's skill, but then they got this other element of thuggishness that they're going to bring to the table as well. So I see Florida just getting through this series. It may be long because I admire Tampa and John Cooper. There's been no better coach, right, John, in the last 20 years than John Cooper. He'll find a way. But I just don't think that they can survive a series with the Panthers.
You mentioned the desire, I think, for the Panthers to try to push, try to forecheck hard. John, just strategically, the real danger is when Kucherov and Braden Point are on the ice together. And the less time they're going to spend in your end, the better. So you'd have to think that there's going to be some sort of mindset that Paul Maurice is going to have, that when those two are on the ice, get the puck in deep and make them spend as much of the time of their shift as possible in their own end, so they can't hurt you at the other side.
Yeah, this is an interesting series. It's to me, it's all about the power play. Florida's the most penalized team in the league. Tampa Bay, I think, might have the best power play, because when you add that playoff experience and the way Kucherov can slow it down, if that thing is sizzling at 35% in this series, this is going to go 7 games, and it could go either way in the end. But yeah, I think it is a bottom 6 matchup, and Tampa Bay has small bottom 6 guys. And I think that's where they're going to get really pounded and worn down. Their defense is not very dynamic. I think that can be an issue as well on that forecheck, turnovers and capitalizing. Duclair was a great pickup by Tampa Bay. I would think they would want to extend him. He changed the team. He gave them a life and an energy after that top line, which really made them a 2-line team almost. But still, and you mentioned Nick Paul's a playoff guy. Cirelli's a playoff guy. They want a low-scoring, mucky game, 5-on-5. I think that's what they want, and then they want to win the series on the power play. When Matthew Tkachuk takes a bad penalty, or someone takes a bad penalty, and they get a power play goal late to win the game. That's what it's going to be. You have 2 Russian goalies going head-to-head. Vasilevsky is one of the most proud athletes in the game. He takes things very personally. He hasn't had a good year. Bobrovsky's been okay. So it's a pretty cool series, but Florida's defensive group is so much better than Tampa Bay's, and their bottom 6 is a little more snarl. The only thing about Barkov is I'd like to see him pick up his game and just be a little more nastier. He's got to take it to that. You can stay true to yourself, but that's it. Like, you look at someone like Patrice Bergeron. He was an underrated, dirty player. he would give it to people. I would like to see Barkov give that cross check to somebody's wrist, a la Marc Messier and Patrice Bergeron, and just a little more nastiness, so the other guys don't have to carry all the water.
I think, John, to add on to what you're saying, I think the Sergachev is a guy that we can't forget that has really hurt this Tampa Bay team. When they've lost him for the season, that was a huge blow to the team. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vic.
No, that's fine. And it's a point that I wanted to raise. But, John, you also mentioned, the snarl factor in this series. And when Florida was sliding a little bit towards the end of the season, one of the things that I noticed about some of the opponents that they were playing was that they were actually pushing back on some of the thuggery by the Panthers. But I just don't think that Tampa Bay really has that kind of makeup. They lost Killorn, who would have been a perfect player for this type of series. So I'm just not certain whether or not Tampa Bay has that snarl to really get in and play with the sandpaper necessary to get Florida off their game.
Right. Like I said, especially that bottom six, Asamont, Glenn Denning, some guys like that. Maroon's not there, like you said, on the bottom six. But we know Steven Stamkos he'll muck it up with the right guy, and he'll try to provide some of that in the playoffs. And as he's a UFA to be, I'm sure that's still in the back of his mind. He got 40 goals, and he wants to show to a good team out there who might want to see him as maybe a difference maker over the summer for a shorter term contract, but at a better cap number that Tampa Bay is going to offer. Be kind of interesting to see that. But yeah, you're right. There's the snarl factor definitely benefits Florida for sure. And they really flicked the switch. That was impressive. Down 2-0 after 1 to Toronto. Playoff Florida showed up, and they put a pounding on them. That was impressive. And I think they're going to carry that over, and they're going to take that right away to Tampa Bay. So it's going to be up to Vasilevsky to deal with that onslaught in the first 10 minutes of the postseason and not just give away game 1, 4-0, 4-1, something like that. So, but I expect a very good series. I think it's going to go 7. Could go either way. I'll lean towards Florida, but I think it's going to go the distance.
Neil, what do you think?
I don't want to keep agreeing with everybody.
We need conflict.
Yeah, we need to muck it up here. I don't want to be Barkov. I just don't see. I don't see the Panthers ending the series in Tampa. And so therefore we're talking about 5 or 7, and I don't see Tampa going down in 5. So I got to pick 7, John. I got to agree with you. I'm stuck.
All right, I'll give you a little conflict, and I'll say that this series does end in Tampa, and I like the Panthers in 6 games. So the winner of that series will be facing Boston and Toronto. This is going to be the 17th time that they have met in the postseason. Both teams have won 8 apiece, but the Bruins have won the last 6. Including 2013, the remarkable comeback in the Game 7 overtime. They won in 2018 and 2019. All these games going 7 games. The last time Toronto beat the Bruins in a playoff series was 1959. I know probably only one of us was around at that time. So, Booch, I know you growing up in New England and having a long history there. Obviously, new expectations for the Bruins. They had the phenomenal regular season last year, only to get knocked off by the Panthers. No Patrice Bergeron. No David Krejci. Totally different look on this team. And, maybe they come in under the radar a little bit, and maybe that's a helpful thing for them.
Yeah, for sure. Because, if you look at the Krejci Bergeron versus Zacha Coyle, there's really not that big a difference. Krejci had lost his offensive game, especially scoring goals. He was just basically a disher. So Coyle and Zacha are much stronger skaters. They're 2 very good skaters with pretty good size. And so they're very functional players. Now they're better slotted 2 and 3 with the number 1 center. Then they're a really good team. So, their goal scoring, I figured would be a problem this year, which, they got off to a good start. But in the end, they're a middle of the pack offensive team. So if the defense ever slides a little bit, if Swayman or Ullmark are off their game a little bit, they're a very average team when that happens. So they're at the point now where there's no margin for error, and everything has to be going well. You keep when you do undersell them, you realize, man, they have gamers. Marchand. Pasternak has always had a sandpaper factor to his game. Even when he was a 19-year-old skinny kid just trying to make it in the league, he always got to the dirty areas. He always didn't mind a chipped tooth or blood. Charlie McAvoy's a physical defenseman, one of the best all-around defensemen in the game. He's the one elite D-man who brings that physical play, that nastiness, that big hip check, that big hit in the neutral zone to set the tone and help his team. So, those three guys are just so impressive to me. And they have two goalies, and they have a good coach, and they have some guys. So they're dangerous. And we know that the Maple Leafs with their goalie and their PK is not good, and their defense can definitely be taken advantage of with a good forecheck. It's close. I just think their talent this time around is just too much for the Bruins to handle, and they will outscore them in the end and finally win their first salary cap playoff series over the Bruins.
Well, Neil, we go back and forth on the overtime losses, and, the Bruins lost 15 games in extra time this year. So, their total record was 47-35. And John, it kind of speaks to your point that, okay, maybe this team wasn't really as good as, the 100+ point season that they were able to put up this year. But, Neil, you coming from Toronto, we talk about the expectations for the Bruins, and there's probably no team either with its on-ice talent or its front office from coach to GM that has as much cumulative pressure as the Leafs to deliver this year.
No, there certainly isn't. Other than there's always the pressure of New York. So, that goes without saying because, being from Toronto, I know that the people there, they're going to love their Leafs and they're going to go to the games no matter what. People in New York are going to love or hate their Rangers and probably still go to the games. There's no hate of the Leafs by the Leaf fans. So that's the difference in why this 1967 thing compared to 1940 has never gotten the legs that the 1940 thing got in New York. Just wanted to make that comparison because I think it's important to understand that it's a different culture in Toronto than in some of the American cities. It just is. And you've got the best player maybe in the league, but certainly on the Leafs, who's from Scottsdale, Arizona. He's not from Canada. Nylander is not from Canada. Yes, Tavares is a Toronto boy, so he understands it. He grew up as a Leaf fan and on and on and on. It's not a big point to say who's going to win the series, but it's not like that they're walking around every day thinking about, oh my God, I wish George Armstrong could tell me how to do this. I wish Punch Imlach would come back. So now you come down to the two teams. I agree with everything that's been said about the Bruins. I don't like what I've seen the last month. I hate that they blew that game to Ottawa. To me, that set off a big alarm bell in my head. The nonsense about, well, maybe they didn't really want to play this team or that's all nonsense. They blew the game. They weren't ready to play. They lost Ottawa at home. They gave up a chance to hang a banner in the Garden for their fans that said Atlantic Division Champions 2024 on a one night game. That's not a good way to go into the playoffs. So it may be the Leafs' turn to win. I don't like the Leafs' inconsistency. I don't think you ever know what you're going to get on a night-to-night basis other than Matthews is going to score. But you don't know what you're going to get the rest of the way. So I know that's Neil, what are you really trying to say here? I think I agree with John that I think that the Leafs are going to win this series. I think it's going to be long. It's going to go 7 again. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough in the Bruins to offset the amount of talent that's on the other side. That's my feeling.
But do they have, meaning Toronto, the goaltending? I mean, you've got this three-headed, and I'm not even going to call it monster. It's almost like a three-headed dose of mediocrity between Samsonov, Wall, and Jones. And can they play at a level that, Jeremy Swayman and Ullmark are going to play at a high level? So can whoever Toronto leans on in this series get their level to a place that can that they can overcome the mistakes that are going to happen with the Toronto defense and their lack of solid defensive play? John, I'll listen to you first.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, that's why I do think they'll just outscore them. I think the Bruins have some, they're just not a well-oiled machine this year. I think there's some issues in the front office and the coaching staff. We know Ullmark's going to be traded. That was kind of awkward in the trade deadline when he vetoed a trade. It's just not the same vibe. I think there's going to be, they lose the series. I think you see some big changes in the Bruins. They have a big amount of cap space this summer. So if they're ever going to make a move and wants a new architect of some sort to come in, this would be the time. They could really transform their team if the right guy will sign with them and they make the right trade with Ullmark. They're really going to be a different team, I think, next year. And they lose this series, they could have a new coach. I think the front office and Neely and Sweeney, that whole dynamic. They've been there a long time together. I just think there's some stuff behind the scenes in Boston that tell me that if things get off the rail, they lose a couple games early, there might not be as much. Now, we know Marchand's a warrior. He's going to fight. That guy wears the C with so much pride. But I just think the foundation's a little wobbly. Now, you can find a cause in the playoffs. You can band together and find a cause and get momentum quickly. Like the Panthers. I mean, they're down 3-1. Brad Marchand has a breakaway to win the series in 5. It's a blowout series win for the greatest regular season team of all time. Now they feel different. Now they could go on to the finals. Instead, bam, there go the Panthers. And they find something, and then they get momentum. The playoffs are about emotional momentum. And if you get emotional momentum, you can do a lot of things.
But conversely, the front office in Toronto, everything has been in place. They've ridden basically 4 forwards for a number of years now. Brendan Shanahan, Sheldon Keefe, team has been there. Obviously, Kyle Dubas has gone on to Pittsburgh. But you have to think that if Toronto falls in this series, that there's big changes coming up on the Toronto side.
Well, Sheldon Keefe won't survive that. If they lose in the first round, he's not going to survive that. Should he survive it? Probably. It's not his fault, but it doesn't matter. They're going to have to do that because just like our friend Lindy Ruff was a sacrificial lamb when the Jersey Devils, pooped out the season this year. I mean, he didn't deserve that. It wasn't his fault, but you got to do something. So off with his head. And the same thing will happen in Toronto if they lose in the first round. I don't think that Brendan Shanahan's going anywhere, and I certainly don't think Brad Trevling is going to be going anywhere. He just got there. But I agree with everything John said before, and I think this is going to be a long series. But I know I have to say one way or the other, and I'm going to agree with John and say it's going to be Toronto.
I like the Leafs as well. I like him in 6. But, this is one that I'm certain can go either way. And I'm going to focus, number 1, on the goaltending. And then number 2, how well the Bruins are able to contain Auston Matthews. So that wraps us up from the East. It looks like we have the consensus of Rangers, Carolina, Florida, and Toronto. But before we go on to the West, John, I want to ask you, because obviously a lot of planning went on late into the night for the playoff scheduling, and I was deeply involved in that for a number of years over a couple of contracts at ESPN. So how does your travel and your work set up for this first round in the early going?
Well, I'm grinding from the get-go. I fly to Winnipeg on Saturday for game 1 on Sunday. I then jump on a plane Monday to come back to Bristol to do studio work on our big Monday night. I think we have a quadruple header. And then I jump back on the plane Tuesday, day of, and go back to Winnipeg for game 2. So me and Cassie Campbell will be there Never been to Winnipeg, never been a part of that whiteout scene. I'm going to wear my white suit, my finest white Easter suit. And so that'll be on display for the people. And so I'm looking forward to feeling that energy in Winnipeg. That's a really good team. So that's how my playoffs start. From there, as you know, we're all day to day, Vic.
Yes, we are. So why don't we start the West with that Winnipeg, Colorado series? Because I think that there is an absolute ton of intrigue here. The Jets win all 3 games, outscoring Colorado 17-4, including this 7-0 blitz last weekend. And this is the first time they're going to meet in the playoffs. And I think a lot of people are looking at Colorado as this, this really shiny, sexy toy with Nathan MacKinnon and Rantanen and their high-speed, high-octane offense. But I'll tell you one thing. I watched this Winnipeg team a lot this year, and this team can flat out defend. They're only team in the league to give up fewer than 200 goals. They've got probably the Vezina Trophy winner in Connor Hellebuyck. And the way they layer their defense, it almost looks like they're really one of the few teams that knows how to answer Colorado.
I agree. I think it's a problem for Colorado. They've been, kind of up and down as we enter the postseason. A lot of new additions, some injuries, trying to figure out that bottom 6. The goalie has not been good. But let's face it, they have a big talent disparity in this series. You're talking high-end Makar, MacKinnon, Rantanen. That's a big, big jump over Winnipeg. Certainly they have offensive players like a Kyle Connor, who's an elite Mike Gartner type of comp to me. He's got to play for 18 years and be in the Hall of Fame and get just an obscene amount of goals the way he plays. And but yeah, they're a hard team to play against. Hellebuyck's gigantic. I give the edge to Winnipeg in this series. I did pick them. But certainly when you have this Hall of Fame talent on the other side, Rantanen's a Hall of Famer, Makar's a Hall of Famer, and MacKinnon's all going in the Hall of Fame. That's a pretty big deal. And so that's, certainly talent-wise, they're the favorite. But I just think the way you mentioned Adam Lowry, they have an old-school shutdown line. We don't see a lot of shutdown lines like that anymore. But that bottom 6 is big. And there's enough on the top 6, like Ehlers is such a good player. We mentioned Connor, and Scheifele, he's a gamer. So there's enough gamers there, and good end talent, I think. And with their system, like you said, and Rick Bowness has they have a cause. Again, the team with a cause can be dangerous. Get Rick Bowness a cup. And so I like Winnipeg. I think it's and I think this will give them so much self-esteem to win this series that they could take it deep and they could carry this if they stay healthy. Because you got to for a team like them, they really can't afford to lose a guy, right? Because that could really cause that Jenga thing to fall.
Any additional pressure on them simply because they're opening this series at home? There was all this jockeying between the Jets, the Avalanche, and the Stars for who were going to finish first this year. And now that Winnipeg has home ice advantage, do we see maybe a little bit added pressure on them that perhaps they didn't expect maybe a week or two ago?
Well, I mean, Neil's probably better answering that kind of question. I just know Colorado was not good on the road this year. They were a home dominant team, whether it's matchups or whether what. So that's why another reason why I like Winnipeg, because Colorado just wasn't a good road team.
Well, I wanted to jump in and give this to Neil that the last couple of weeks of the regular season, the Avalanche really had the ability to put a stamp and take first place in the Central. They give up 7 goals to Dallas. They give up 7 goals to Winnipeg, the 2 teams that they're competing against. And so, Neil, it looks like this team has really been showing some warts down the stretch, even in their own building.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. But I'll make this quicker. My thoughts, because I think we've pretty much hit on all the different things of this series. But I think at the end of the day, it will come down to Connor Hellebuyck versus Nathan MacKinnon. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think Hellebuyck is the best goalie in the league. He could steal a series from any team, never mind this hugely talented offensive, great Colorado Avalanche. But in my mind, Nathan MacKinnon is the current day Mark Messier. He's going to will his team. He's going to will himself. He's going to bowl through. He is going to do whatever it takes to win. I have a really hard time counting him out in the first round. Like imagining Nathan MacKinnon going home after the first round. I just can't envision that. And because of that, I'm sort of leaning towards Colorado. And I know that, we've done a lot of dissecting of these two rosters, but much as I said about the Lindgren brothers, Nathan MacKinnon would rather die than lose the first round, I think. So I think it's going to be interesting, but if they can light up Hellebuyck, they're going to win. And if Hellebuyck can shut down Rantanen and Niskanen and McKinnon and Makar, and then they're going to win. And
but what about,
I'm sorry,
what about
I'm making it real simple.
But what about their goaltending? Colorado's goaltending, Alexander Georgiev has been spectacularly mediocre down the stretch. And, where I think we saw really the last couple of years, superstar goalie didn't win. Darcy Kemper in Colorado in 22, Adin Hill with Vegas last year. They provided good, manageable goaltending. But I'm not certain Georgiev can even give them that.
Well, I know you feel that way about Georgiev. I saw Darcy Kemper win the Stanley Cup for for Colorado a few years ago. I say Washington because he's there now. I didn't think Darcy Kemper could be a Stanley Cup winning goalie. And so, it's easy to envision Hellebuyck winning series because he's so darn good. But if I could see Georgiev playing at least up to the level to win that series. Look, Toronto has no goaltending. We just said that. And yet we're picking Toronto to win the series. So I don't know. I don't know that I think there's a huge disparity between the goaltending of Colorado and the goaltending of Winnipeg. But again, I come down to this average goaltending on Colorado, but unbelievable offense, unbelievable goaltending on Winnipeg, and a great system up front and really well put together. Which is going to win? I don't know. And I know the regular season numbers and all that, but I always, John, have thrown the regular season numbers out the door when the playoffs start, because as you know, in 94, just for one example, we could never beat the Islanders ever at home in the Nassau Coliseum. And then we end up blowing them out in there in the playoffs. So that's just one of many examples. I got to tell you guys, I'm going to go with Colorado on this series.
All right, we have our first split finally, because I think as much as, yes, you put the regular season aside and maybe there's some added pressure now that Winnipeg's opening this series at home, but I like the matchup here for Winnipeg just being able to defend. And I think that they have something figured out on Colorado that the Avalanche are going to have to adjust to. So I like the Jets in the series in 6 games. I think they're going to win this thing in Colorado and stick it right in the Avalanche face. So let's head over to.
We haven't done the numbers yet. I didn't give a number, so, and I know I have to. I'm going to say Colorado in 7.
All right,
and I'll say that'd be a great team. I'll go Winnipeg in 7. But yeah, Nathan MacKinnon's definitely that life or death athlete that I just love. Those are my kinds of athletes.
And that's one series I'm so looking forward to. Some of the ones that maybe don't get as much publicity because of one team or the other. So that one's going to be extremely intriguing, as are the defending Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights having to open their series in Dallas. And Vegas won all 3 games during the course of the regular season. All of them were in the first half of the season. 2 of the games going to overtime. This will be the 3rd playoff meeting between the 2 clubs, 1 apiece. Dallas won in the bubble in 2020, and then Vegas in the West Final last year en route to the Stanley Cup. And I think I want to start, Neil, with Vegas on this one, because as much as, they say, well, they're the champs until somebody knocks them off, this is a pretty beat up team going into the playoffs. Petrangelo's hurt. We don't know the status of Mark Stone. Anthony Mantha missed a couple of games. Will Carrier. So this is a pretty nicked up team going up against a healthy, thick, deep Dallas club.
This Vegas Knights team is the 1993 Montreal Canadiens. They won the cup last year because the Bruins got knocked out in the first round. It's in my opinion. And yeah, they deserved it. They deserved to win because of the way the playoffs played out. But they were not the best team in the league last year, and they're certainly not the best team in the league this year. They are defending champs, and you can never count them out until they are out. However, I don't know what happened where Montreal was actually in 93, 94. I wish I had that at my fingertips, but I think that they're going to go out in the first round of Dallas. I don't think there's any doubt. And that's about as much dissecting as I need to do, because I don't give them any chance against Dallas.
I tend to lean that way too, but my fear is that that Vegas has the switch that Florida has. And I remember that regular season game in Toronto this year when Vegas went there, and it seemed like, we're going to show these guys what the blueprint is to win a hockey game, and like a playoff game. We're just going to clinically dissect and destroy them. And they went out and they did it. And so that's my little bit of fear for them. But as Vic mentioned, this lack of practice time for players, it kind of remind me of Colorado in terms of a lot of new guys. Hurdle shows up. Carrier is such an important playoff guy who played well against Dallas last time these two teams met up. Those guys matter. Those big, fast guys who are a little physical to their game. But yeah, I just think, and my concern about Dallas is a couple of young players who are key, Johnston and Harley, like they're really key guys for them. And what if some reason they were to falter? But the way they constructed this team in Dallas is really impressive. I had another awards ballot this year for the third straight time. I put Rope Hintz as my Selkie guy number one. Like he's one of those guys who's just a 200-foot beast of a player. And so, Robertson can get lost sometimes in a fast-paced game, but I don't think this will be a fast-paced series per se. So he could be a guy who could thrive because he can go up and down depending on the style of play. But yeah, I think this is the time for Dallas to get them early. Almost looked like Vegas was avoiding Edmonton with the way they played their final regular season game. I don't know. It looked very interesting. But so they might like this Dallas matchup, this short little plane flight and staying in the US of A. But I do think that this is Dallas's chance. They're definitely a cup contending team, and I think it's good to get the champs right away. Much like we talked about before, this would be great for their self-esteem to win this series and carry it forward.
Dallas is also so strong in a half ice game also. And I mean, they like to clog the neutral zone and then just push back at you. And, they've also had a little bit influx of, new blood this year with, Logan Stankoven coming in late in the season and Steen as well, and Steele. And, to me, it's such a compliment to a lot of the veterans on this team, like the Tyler Sagans and the Jamie Benns and the Joe Pavelskis. And there's just something about the balance of this club. They added Tanev at the trade deadline also, and Jake Ottinger has been solid in goal. So, this is a really big task. And, and I didn't mention before, Chandler Stevenson has also been sitting out the last couple of games as well. So, you've got a team that's coming in banged up against just this thick, deep club. And I have a hard time seeing Vegas overcoming that.
I think they can overcome it. Like you said, these guys do get healthy. They can get healthy. Even if they lose the first two games of the series, if they get another 10 days telling these people, and suddenly, like you said, Chandler, they all show up, they could then run off 4 of 6, right? I mean, it's like it is possible. They do have a lot of stuff there if it all comes together. Bruce Cassidy is a goal suppression coach. If they find that groove again, Jack Eichel's a legit superstar. Marchessault has had a career year as he wants that one more big contract. So there's still a lot of stuff there. And like I said, my only fear is the flip of the switch that the Panthers seem to have. But the Dallas needs to pounce on them early and don't give them hope.
How deep does this series go?
I got to go in 7.
Is that for me? I have Dallas in 5.
And I got
right.
Dallas in 6. I'm gonna give Vegas a little bit of respect here, and I think it'll be a very intriguing series anytime you get the defending champions going on the road early and really having to prove their mettle early on. I did want to ask one more question though regarding this series, because the tandem of Adin Hill and Logan Thompson in that they've been okay this year. They haven't been great. So how much are they going to need to elevate their game in order to get Vegas past Dallas?
Yeah, Hill came out of nowhere last year. What a revelation he turned out to be. His numbers were excellent, like in that 930 range for a while there. He was definitely sniffing the Conn Smythe as well. So, yeah, again, that was that emotional momentum I talked about. He had it, and the team had it riding him. Once they started believing in him, it's just like, when's this guy got to go away? And he just didn't. So, once they got to the finals and he was established. But you're right, having that one guy who's going to pick it up. And that could happen. Like I said, he did it midstream. Didn't expect to play. So you just never know in this environment. So many weird things can happen in the playoffs that obviously make it tough to predict. And but you're right. There's a lot of questions here, and Dallas has fewer questions. Their only question is Jake Ottinger has been kind of up and down this year, And what if he's not good? And if he's good, I agree with your Dallas in 5 scenario. But can he be good for 2 straight weeks and have really start stacking these great games?
All right, let's head over now to maybe the series that's going to get the least amount of attention, certainly in the States. And that's Vancouver and Nashville, rather. And the Canucks won the season series 3-0. This is only the second time that they are going to meet in the postseason. And I remember the only other time that they met was in 2011. And the Canucks won that series in 6 games. And Ryan Kessler was an absolute beast in that series with 11 points in the 6-game series. Totally different time now. And certainly Coach of the Year candidate Rick Tocchet has done a remarkable job with the Canucks, as has Andrew Brunette. For Nashville, really turning their season around, and probably Nashville being the most I think they're Washington Western Conference as the team that at the start of the season, we really didn't see them heading into the playoffs.
For sure. They came out of nowhere. The canceled U2 concert changed everything for them. But Barry Trotz is an interesting guy. He knows how to team build. Another one of those guys at the morning skate. He just loves to talk. He'll talk all day. PR has to interrupt him, or you're there next to him for hours. He just loves to talk hockey, and he brought in Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen. He knew that he needed some adults in the room, some of those life or death guys that we talked about, where that matters. Philip Forsberg is an elite guy, that like Ovechkin-like guy you talked about comparing them to the Capitals. But Roman Josi in that line of Forsberg and Nyquist and O'Reilly were just unbelievable from the get-go. From opening night, they all had, Forsberg had a career year, Nyquist had a career year, but you look at Nyquist's playoff numbers and they are, look the other way bad. And so, again, we'll see, can that translate to the postseason? Rick Tocchet's going to get his team to play nasty. I think Nashville could have some power play chances early. Some of their lineup is young and light, but the defense is pretty good. And they have that culture of Barry Trotz, playoff goal suppression hockey, which I'm sure they're going to try to play. They got a decent bottom 6, which could make it interesting. I like Vancouver to win the series. Quinn Hughes was my vote for Norris. I voted him as my Norris Trophy winner. I have Josi too. So on my Norris Trophy ballot, this is 1-2. So this is and I was thinking as you guys were talking, like, the playoffs elevate talent more than elevates mediocrity, right? Like it's a different level. So an average player might get this much better, but a good player gets that much better. And have more good players. That's why you usually do win this time of year, and it can elevate talent. And that's my one question about Vancouver. Some of that talent is younger, maybe a little unproven year after year. Can they elevate? Like we imagine Josi will elevate. Forsberg will probably elevate. Ryan O'Reilly will elevate. He was good with Toronto last year down the stretch and in the postseason. those guys will elevate. Will Vancouver elevate? That's the big question here. I think they will, but I could see why someone would pick Nashville in this series.
Neil, how does Rick Tocchet get it there for the Canucks?
I don't know. I am shocked at Tocchet's success this year, because he really, as a head coach, hasn't had a ton of success in other places. I'm not inferring anything there other than stating factually that that's been the case. Here's what I think. I think the Canucks have had just a tremendous season with very little adversity all season. They've gone through the Pacific Division almost from start to finish. They started with that blowout of Edmonton, and they carried through first place. I don't know if they were ever out of first place in the Pacific. They've got some very young people in Demko, Hughes, others, and others that are very young in playoff experience, Peterson and so on. I think that Nashville has a real opportunity here to throw adversity at the Canucks. And the Canucks, and guys know this, if they're sitting in their locker room going, oh my God, if we lose 2 more games, this magical season is over. What? Like, how do we handle this? How do we handle this? What do we do? If Ryan O'Reilly and Forsberg and that crew and Yossi is sitting in their locker room and they're like, guys, we can't lose 2 more games or this year is over. Come on, let's go. Okay. They're going to handle it a lot differently because they've been through adversity and they've been through it during their career and they've been through it this season. So this is an interesting matchup to me because my theory is that Vancouver's going to have to stumble before they'll be great. And so if they're going to be great, no team that ever got great didn't stumble at one point. I mean, you look back in history, they've all had to pay the price of misery a year or 2 earlier than that. So they learned what it took to get through the misery. And I think that's where the Canucks are. So I think there's a real chance here for Nashville to beat Vancouver.
You're seeing Thatcher Demko coming back from injury, but also, interesting story, UC Saros until the Predators went on this extraordinary run was talked about as being trade bait. So I think one of the big keys that can win this series is going to be in net.
Mm-hmm. For sure, because there's not a lot of really, really high-end offense, layers of it in this series. And so, yeah, if you can neutralize one guy, one line, it's going to make this an under series, like you said, a goaltending series between Saros and Demko. And, Demko, the bigger goalie, great demeanor. Saros is always really bullish on him. But he's been playing a lot the last couple of years. When I look at starts, those plus 60 starts, that's kind of what the Kings did to Jonathan Quick. He played too much hockey, and then he had a big fall off. And I think it's taken him years to kind of have the year he had this year, like just kind of get refreshed. You can't be playing these 60 plus. And especially when they leaned on him the way Nashville leaned on Saros as well. That's going to take a toll on a goalie. He's kind of in that neighborhood. So he needs to be fresh physically, his hips, his knees, his mind. And so that's going to, like you say, yeah, it does come down to the 2 goalies here. Who plays better is going to win, probably. Yeah, I like the Canucks. I'm just going to kind of roll off the regular season. If you're that good, that long, a first place team, obviously you're good. And you have some players and you have some sort of, a coaching staff, which made a big impact. Talk and Adam Foote, they obviously made an impact. Now it's been a long season and that can wear off. And now the talent the talent and the resolve that Neil talked about, that's what dominates this type of year. So, talent and resolve. And we don't know that they have that until they get in it. And that's what we're going to find out. That's why we love the playoffs. It reveals resolve.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying Nashville in 6.
All right. I like that.
I'm agreeing also. It feels like it's almost one of those safe underdog picks to make that if you're wrong, okay. But, if you're right, then Neil and I just look brilliant like we always do. So So the last of the 8 series, I think there's a ton of intrigue here. And as I watched last night, I was, kind of intrigued that the Kings would even want this series with Edmonton. And I haven't liked what I've seen from LA all season. But this is going to be the 10th time that the clubs meet in the postseason. Edmonton has won 7 out of the 9. And of course, they took out the Kings each of the last 2 years. So, for me, I've seen LA just be completely inconsistent, really from goal out the entire season. It's almost like their goaltending has been the microcosm of the entire year for them. And Neil, I just want to ask you first whether this team has any sort of matchup advantage at all. I mean, we know that, when they're on their game, they do a good job clogging up center ice. They play a heavy game, and ideally they would want to play the same way as they did when they won their cups in 2012 and 2014. But can they execute that against a very dynamic Oilers offense?
I think the answer is no. I don't think they can. I think, I love Kopitar. He's such a great competitor, been such a great captain, a Hall of Famer, obviously. Same with Drew Doughty. Love the guy. He plays 30 minutes a night but they're old now. And Edmonton has at least equal goaltending with Skinner. Skinner has come on and played very well for them. Edmonton, yeah, they have some holes now, and their consistency isn't what it possibly could be. But I think they're a far better team than the LA Kings are at this moment in time. And I think almost in every area. And then you put in those superstars that are today's superstars. They're not yesterday's superstars. And I don't mean this disparagingly towards Kopitar and Doughty, because I just said how much I love those guys. But they're yesterday's superstars. Today's superstars are going to be in the orange and blue. And I really lean heavily in this series towards the Oilers.
Yeah, again, huge talent disparity in this one. But, you like to have a given in net. And Stuart Skinner isn't quite a given, has played very well. Kenny Holland pretty much laid down the gauntlet earlier in the season, and he brought him into his office and said, "You got to get going, or I got to go get a goalie." Like he really read him the riot act, and he did. And so he didn't have to go get a goalie, But yeah, this team is ready. It's the best team Connor McDavid has had in his NHL career in terms of how it's constructed. And outside of the non-given in net, we agree with that. But as you mentioned, last couple of cup winners, Kemper and Aiden Hill. He's good enough. He's big enough. He's a local kid. There's just a lot there. It's Kenny's last year in Edmonton. He's going to move on after this year. Interesting. Even Leon Draisaitl, he's up after next year. So I assume you offer him the extension this summer. If he doesn't take it, you trade him. Or you roll one more time and let him walk and use the gap, just use the $9 million in salary as a player, as a quasi trade. You don't lose players for nothing in the hard salary cap area. You replace them with a different player. So you have to worry about losing them for nothing. You can just roll them out for another year and try to win next year and then let them walk. But yeah, this is the best team Connor McDavid's had. He's the best player. And now it's time to go. This is it.
But I think something that's so interesting here is both of these teams made coaching changes during the course of the year. And Chris Knobloch takes over for Jay Woodcroft, and Jim Hiller takes over for Todd McClellan. But I think the more interesting part for me is the structure that Knobloch put in place, that the defensive numbers really improved under Knobloch. And that, of course, extended to the goaltending as well. And just the structure that he has put in with this Oilers team makes them, I think, a lot more complete than the Kings.
I think I would agree with you on that, I think that the coaching edge has to go to Edmonton in this one. I think Knobloch and Coffey have done a remarkable job. I don't know how anyone could argue that. They've done a remarkable job. And when I say that, guys, I want to make sure I'm not disparaging the guy who was there, who they replaced, because I don't think he did a bad job. I don't think it was his fault the way the team got off. And yeah, they changed coaches, and then it looked like it was all about the coaching. Well, it's all about the message, right? Because the guy comes in and he has a different message, just a different way of saying things, he turned the box, he tilted it a little bit, and the players saw it from a different angle. So anyway, I do believe he's done a remarkable job. I think that the Kings, they just don't have it. I love them at the beginning of the year. I thought they were a contender early in the year. I don't know if you guys remember, but boy, October and November, they looked like a big, heavy, strong team. But I think as the year went on, they're not a young team, and their young guys haven't been there long enough or whatever to replace what they need. And I just think it's Edmonton's time in this series.
A few weeks ago, Henrik Lundqvist kind of ranked the goaltending for all of the teams in the Western Conference. And the club that he had last were the Kings. And Cam Talbot has struggled literally the entire season. David Riddick had pretty much, a decent stretch for a little while where he supplanted Talbot as the number one. But I'm sitting at this and you kind of want to see maybe there's a possibility that either Talbot or Riddick can elevate their game to make this somewhat competitive. But I just don't see it. There's too many soft goals, and this goaltending is just not reliable enough to facilitate an upset, John.
Exactly. And Edmonton's getting some good bottom six play. Some guys are emerging. Ryan McLeod's emerging, an amazing skater, good size, should be a better player than he's shown so far. He's starting to come a little bit. Fogel's a UFA. Someone's going to overpay him this summer. He's a great skater, more veteran than he was when they got him. And, Henrique stepping in. And like I said, all these guys, Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, they're older. They're coming together. They've been through stuff, as Neil mentioned. So their resolve is there. Now, like you said, get the goaltending. The Kings have to know, and Kopitar down the middle, they could formulate something, and maybe Byfield and Fiala can pop down low and beat Skinner, whose confidence is shaken a bit, and maybe they'll pop in 3-4 goals. They have the ability to do that and scare them a little bit, and because it won't be easy. But yeah, in the end, this just too much. And I kind of like Edmonton's path, how things are forming for them. I think this is going to be a good path for them to reach the final if this is the year for the first time with McDavid.
Neil, any shot for an upset here?
Not in my mind, no. I'm taking Edmonton in 5.
John?
I'm going to do the same thing. Edmonton in 5. Win those first 2 at home, split on the road, and come back and win game 5 and get rested and make that long haul.
Just the way I see it as well. Well, that wraps up our 8 opening round series. We're going to wrap up with a little bit of fun on the back end. But first, a word from MyGray.
Time now for a quick shout out to our sponsor. NHL Wraparound is brought to you by MyGray, your source for game-worn jerseys. Head to mygray.com to get your collection started today. Get real, get it from MyGray. NHL Wraparound subscribers can take 10% off any hockey jersey when they order at mygray.com and use the coupon code WRAP10. Don't forget that coupon code WRAP10.
Welcome back to NHL Wraparound. We've been joined by ESPN's John Buccigross, and just because it's ESPN, we're going to do a little PTI style Q&A to wrap up this playoff preview show. So I'm going to ask one question to both of you. Quick answer, no elaboration. Just move on to the next one. So, Neil, you first. Of the 8 higher seeds, the one most ripe to get knocked out in the opening round?
Vancouver Canucks.
I'll go Boston Bruins.
I'm going to go Vancouver as well. Of the 8 lower seeds, which one advances the furthest and how far? John, you.
We'll go Toronto Conference Final. Why not?
I'm going to take Colorado Conference Final.
I'm going to say Nashville, but they only get as far as round 2. Series guaranteed to go 7 games. Neil.
I will say Florida, Tampa.
Winnipeg, Colorado for me.
And even though I don't think I picked any series to go 7 games, since I've got to throw my chips into the middle of the table here, I'm going to say Boston and Toronto, and maybe Toronto gets it figured out this time. All right, a little bit of a fun question here. Which 2 coaches most likely to have a war of words during their series? John.
I had a tie. I kind of like the Maurice Cooper. They're 2 of the best talkers in the game, and no one likes saying the F word more than Paul Maurice. Boy, does he love to accentuate that F word. And then maybe a Keith Montgomery, Boston, Toronto, little shouty match. Sheldon Keefe isn't afraid to chirp at other people.
Neil.
Patrick Waugh and Rod Brindamore.
I'm going to go a little different. I'm going to say Peter Laviolette and Spencer Carberry. I think Carberry first time into the fight, and boy, Laviolette will complain about just about everything. So I think I'm really curious to see how that's going to fall. Which analyst works more first round games, John, Ray Ferraro, or Brian Boucher?
Jeez, I got to go Ferraro by a nose, literally a nose.
Mr. Smith?
Well, how would I know?
It's a crapshoot.
Yeah, I'll just take Bush.
All right. And I think I'm going to take Bush as well here, simply because maybe with ESPN doing the final, maybe Ray gets a little bit of a blow somewhere.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, manage those appearances. Can't have overage.
That's what happens when you delve into this for as long as I had beforehand. So, surefire guarantee of the most dominant first round skater. Neil.
Gensel for Carolina.
I'll go Panarin, Rangers.
I'm going to go McKinnon just because he'd rather die than lose. And I think I have to follow those wise words there. Surefire guarantee top first round goaltender. John, you first.
I'll go Connor Hellebuyck. I'm riding the Jets. I think they could actually make the finals if we're not careful. And I'm going to go with them and Connor Hellebuyck.
Neil?
I'm going to do an easy one. Shesterkin.
Oh, good one.
I'm going to side with John here and go with Connor Hellebuyck as well of the Winnipeg Jets. Okay, the player who comes out of nowhere to screw up your first round playoff pool. Neil, you first.
You're talking about our good old days in 1990 with the Washington Capitals. There was that player, the forward that killed us,
John Drews.
John Drews. You're talking about a John Drews, right? Who's your John Drews?
That's it.
This is the John Drews Award. Who gets that? I'd say that is going to go to Nick Paul.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going with Michael McCarron. I did my homework. This guy
you did.
12 goals this year. Big body, has a little bit of skill for Nashville. May gets a good matchup against me because I picked Vancouver, so my playoff poll would be injured. My own personal playoff poll would be injured a little bit. And if I'm picking a team, and I pick Vancouver, but I think Michael McCarron of Nashville could have a little 4-goal, 2-assist series, a little 6 points in 7 games.
I'm doing the same thing as you are, and I'm picking a player that I actually picking his team to lose in the opening round. I'm going with Tomas Hertl of the Vegas Golden Knights, who
good playoff performer.
a good playoff performer, and I think not a lot of people paying attention to him late in the season, and also, with all of, Marchessault and Eichel, I think that this is a player that hasn't put up too many stats, for Vegas, but may do so in the postseason. Okay, number of overtime games in the opening round, Neil.
I'm going with 10.
I'm going to say 7. I'm not sniffing a lot of overtime for some reason because I think we have some lopsided matchups in the first round. A couple. Like I see a Winnipeg, Colorado for sure. Boston, Toronto will have a couple. So let me go 8. 8 as in Cam Neely.
All right. I'm going to go with 12 just to be different.
That's a lot of postage for me.
Oh, ton of postage. 2 teams with the best paths to the Stanley Cup final. Let me just, unpack this first and say, this is so much about matchups, and it's almost like a game of rock, paper, scissors where team A matches up against team B better than team C, but team C better than team A. So 2 teams with the best path. John.
I like Edmonton's path a lot. If they go, LA, Vancouver back to back, that's like a pretty good way to start your playoff series for them. I think those are, 2 series that are very manageable for them to get to the conference final, stay healthy, maybe do it all in about 10 or 11 games. And so I like that path a lot there. And I actually like the path for Florida. I know that opening matchup could be tough, but it could be not tough. And then the next matchup, I think, really plays into their hands. And then whatever's left on the other side, we'll see what happens. Maybe Carolina or the Rangers get upset. So I'm going to go with them in the East.
You know what, John? Florida and Edmonton, it was your picks, and I can't argue that. Not from what I was thinking that as you were talking. I'm going, who's going to do it? I thought about Carolina, but Carolina's going to have if everything goes the way we're saying it's going to go, Carolina's going to have a tough second round with the Rangers.
Yeah, real tough.
And so that's not going to be easy. Yeah, right. I think that Florida matches up well against either Boston or Toronto. So anyway, Vic, that's my 2. Same as John.
Well, I'm going to drink the Eastern Conference Kool-Aid and go along with Florida, but I'm going to take the Dallas Stars in the West. Although, John, I do love your points about and Neil as well, about the path that Edmonton has, that it's probably a little bit softer to the conference final. All right, the golden question, who wins the Stanley Cup? Mr. Buccigross.
I'm going to Ryan McDavid. Like I said, the path, I think, looks good. The conference final, it could be Vegas. It could be Dallas. Could be a Winnipeg. I think there's a chance they have all Canadian access to the Stanley Cup final this year. For the Edmonton Oilers, I think they might stay in Canada for the entire playoff season, and for the latter part of it, and to get there and finish off with Winnipeg. And I kind of like the Oilers and their path and their cause and everything. They could see Vancouver in the second round, and they could see Winnipeg in the conference final, and then we'll see what happens in the final.
Neil?
I'm not going to equivocate from what I've said all season long. I'm going to stick with my guns and say the Florida Panthers. I've been saying it for a couple of months now. I like them. They play the regular season like there's the playoffs. We had Keith Tkachuk on, John, earlier in the season, and he gave us a great insight into what was going on with the Panthers through his son, obviously, and so on. And the thing that I really like is they won the President's Trophy 2 years ago, pre-Tkachuk. They were the Cinderella that ran all the way through. Nobody could believe it, to the final last year. Every time I've seen that kind of a scenario, that team drops off in year 3. So they're good. They're Cinderella. They think they're better than they are over the summer. And they have a big drop off the next year because they're not as good as they thought they were just because they went to the final. This team got better. This team went back to a President's Trophy contender. They almost won it. And there was something there. And I think that conversation, Vic, we had with Keith Tkachuk convinced me that this is the real deal.
I'm going to go a little bit different here, and I'm going to go with the Dallas Stars. You know, I've been trying to talk myself out of this the entire spring so far, but I love their depth. To me, there's no weakness on this team if they play at optimum level at all three positions. And I think it's about time for Peter DeBoer to finally get a Stanley Cup ring. So, I think that does it for now. John, thanks so much for joining us. The bad news here is really that because it's before noon Eastern, we don't have any chicken parm to send you off with, but just a great job. Hope you enjoyed joining us today, because just so much insight and just so much that we unpacked here, and just really enjoyed having you.
Well, we all love the sport and live the sport. Great working with you, Vic, and of course Neil as well. Got to know both of you. Work with Neil as well back in the day on NHL Tonight. So we go way back, and it's the great seeing two old friends and who love hockey as much as I do. I really appreciate you having me.
And we hope to do it again.
No, we love having you on, John, and you've made this a quality show by your presence alone, and I really mean that. Just your presence puts us in a much higher level. We want to say thank you too, though, to our sponsor, My Gray, the game worn jerseys and game worn apparel that they have. You can find them on mygray.com. Again, thanks to John Buccigross from ESPN, who you'll hear all through the playoffs. As you know, if you've got any comments or questions, send them to nhlwraparound@gmail.com. Let's get the playoffs going, guys.
Amen.
Drop the biscuit.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.